I believe that we will live in spite of the government. Our motto in Special Forces is De Oppresso Liber. We liberate the oppressed. Is there a better people to liberate today than the American people? Is there a greater cause? If there is, I need to know it. I want to be about it. I firmly believe that within the lifespans of all of us, unless we're called for special missions beyond the veil, that within the lifespans of each of us, we will see perfect government. But I do not believe that it is under the United Nations or under David Rockefeller or any of the Europeans that basically own the banks that we now have. And so as I see it, it's pretty simple. It isn't easy, but is it worth it? I believe that it is. And so I really believe that what we're doing is right and right enough that we will get the exposure we need. And remember, it's not Bo Gritz that you're supporting. There's going to be 16,000 of you. It is us, it's the United States that we are supporting. I have just been a person who will pick up a banner of liberty. I'm going to tell you the truth, the way that it is, the way you can read it for yourself, but they don't show it to you in the schools, and you'll have the solutions. But it's up to us if we are going to do this thing. The key word, together. That's the way it is. Don't try too hard. But if what we're doing is right and right enough, you've got to put your shoulder to the wheel. It will happen. So if we do get these 30-minute segments, then you need to be prepared when people come around and say, who is this guy? What is this I heard? You can say, let me tell you about it. You can have a pamphlet. You can have something that you can say, I've listened to him. Or I've got this videotape. Make copies of it. Just be prepared to do whatever you can. You can't do it all, but every one of us can do something. And then the last little thing, friends, if Bo Gritz and Jack McLam, having absolutely nothing other than what God gave us between our ears, can go up to Idaho and succeed in 5 days of difficult negotiations to preserve the lives of the Weaver family, don't you think that George Bush could take Jim Baker? Let him take Billy Graham. Fly Air Force One to Hanoi. Spend 5 days as the President of the United States in difficult negotiations. Don't you think he'd bring home a whole airplane full of prisoners of war? George Bush won't, but I will. I guess I'll just turn it over to Mr. Martinez, and if you got whatever you got organized here, I'm going to take off and fly back to Sandy Valley. I've got radio shows all day tomorrow, and then we head back off again for Montana and for Oregon and Washington State and some other places. But I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask questions that I may not have covered.
If you have those questions now, hold them up and they'll pick them up and bring them forward. Hold them to the center. Hold your hands high.
One of the questions that was up here when I got up here said, was Randy Weaver in Delta Force with you? I was the intelligence officer for Project Delta and the reconnaissance chief. Randy Weaver is not a Vietnam veteran. Randy Weaver was a young corporal, an E4, at Fort Bragg in 1969 when I came back from Vietnam. Because I'd had some good success as a guerrilla commander and a special operations chief, I was brought back to Fort Bragg to share with the new Green Berets the secrets of our tradecraft against the enemy. Randy Weaver was one of those young soldiers. I didn't know him personally. He was never in my command. He never spent a day in Delta Force. He got out of the Army in 1971 as a sergeant with an honorable discharge. He had never had a single mark, not even a traffic ticket, against his record all the way up until the time that this avalanche landed on him. So I hope that answers the question about Weaver. We had no association other than the fact that he was in the Army, in Special Forces, until 1971. And he was an American citizen. Believe me, if you get into trouble, in the same kind of trouble, and you're able to communicate that you think I can help you, then even if it's one of you, and even if we are President of the United States at that time, I think even one American ought to be worth the President's time. I'm sure maybe one day less at Kitty Bunkport could be well applied to giving America. Why don't you kind of make sure that we kind of get, in other words, don't ask the same one each time. Go ahead and just give them to me, but you go ahead and decide, because you may have some that are kind of alike. Okay, what shall the United States of America, what should be the United States of America position concerning the other nations of the world? Very simply, we're going to defend our borders. We're going to let other nations defend their borders. We're going to stop being the world policeman. As I mentioned, there's something worth fighting and dying for, but it's all within the boundaries of the United States. Now here's something to think about. Right now, there are $40 a month Russian rocket scientists ricocheting all over the world. Nostradamus, remember this guy? He, in his quatrains, they believe, saw a time when the New World, America, would have a conflagration on the east and west coast. Friends, if you shoot a missile toward Moscow right now, it does not hit. Moscow right now has an overhead protective network. We do not. We've got to have something to make sure that America is not intimidated by any belligerent power or person. I don't want Nostradamus' quatrain to come true here in the United States. Let it be decided somewhere else. The world is raging against itself. I believe America can stand alone against that raging if we will. Pro-life and government's position. Thank you. See, this, you just can't get all these things. Otherwise, you'd have, you know why not Randy, but Kevin gave up? It was a joke, but it was some truth to it. Randy finally agreed to let Kevin come out of the cabin on the third day of negotiations. He said, Bo, Kevin said he just can't stand to hear you say another word, so he's going to give up and come out. And if I were to try to go through everything that I think needs to be done, you would give up and leave, and I'd be here by myself. Here is something very important. It is this right to life question. And here's the thing that I see, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. I see the media slanting this thing. I see the special interest groups hard at work. I see the Supreme Court making law. That's not what they're supposed to be doing. And so as a president, if I have any strong suit, it is making sure that the responsibility is placed on the proper shoulders. You see, I think these guys in Washington that okayed the marshals to go up there with no warrant, they're the ones that are guilty of murder, not the people that are pulling the trigger. And so, when it comes to this right to life issue, here's how I'm going to solve it. I'm going to offer a 27th Amendment. It is going to be a human right to life amendment. You know what's going to happen? See, George Bush says, I'm pro-life. What has he ever done to actually advance or promote that position? Now, Bill Clinton comes in and says, I'm pro-choice. It's pretty simple. They're already doing quite a few things along that line. But here's what we're going to do to solve it. I'm going to offer, as President, a 27th Human Right to Life Amendment. Now, God will grace this nation in accordance with how our laws are, not in accordance with how the President is. 75% of the states are going to have to ratify that amendment. If they do ratify it, then the question is over. It is now law. There is a human right to life in the United States. They've got it in these foreign countries. So why don't we have it in America? If you don't ratify it with 75% of the states, then the question is also answered, is it not? And I think we'll either gain the grace that comes to us through righteous laws, or we'll deserve the condemnation we get. But it's not going to be on the shoulders of one person. It's going to be called from the nation. That way God can judge this nation, as we will. So that's my answer to it. Personally, I think you know where I stand. But one person isn't enough. It's got to be decided. And it has to be decided by the people. What are we going to do about welfare? It's real easy. There's an old axiom. If you ever allow some people, like Congress, to take from one group and give to another, pretty soon the group over here is picked absolutely clean. We should not have a welfare program. We ought to have a workfare program. Now, let me define it just a little more. For example, the churches are 501c3, aren't they? It means they are charitable. Well, if they're charitable, let them open their doors and give charity. Because if the churches would take in just the homeless mothers and the children, we would be 1/3 through that problem. Now, what about the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the Guggenheim Foundation, Ford Foundation? These are billionaire tax shelters. Well, they're not going to receive a penny in tax deductions that isn't a direct exchange of what they have done toward charity. It means work fairs. It means job retraining. It means helping provide shelters for those that need them. Friends, it doesn't have to come from the federal government. It shouldn't come from the federal government. People ask me, well, Bo, what are you going to do about the elderly? If 2 parents can raise 4 children, why can't 4 children take care of 2 parents when the time comes? Before too many of you get excited about it, Social Security is an agreement. Those that are drawing Social Security are going to draw it until the last breath. But those that are not drawing it, I'm 53, there's no way in the world the Social Security is going to be bankrupt 10 times over by the time I am 65. When you are able to keep, like the Constitution says, all that you make, friends, you don't need Social Security, which is communistic, as far as what the Communist Party does. I'm not trying to put a burden on the people that are drawing Social Security, but let me tell you, when it began in 1940 was the very first recipient. There were 18 people working to support one retired person. Today, how many people are supporting a recipient of Social Security? 3 are supporting it, and soon it will be 2. Now that comes right straight from the commissioner in charge of social insecurity. If you're riding around in a Winnebago feeling really good, think about it. Do you want your grandchildren, 2 people or 3 people, working to have their money taken so that you can kind of cool it? I think if you need help, you're going to get help. But if you don't need it, I think that you should not. Now again, we're going to have to start this from a go. Right now, if you're drawing it, you're going to get it. Matter of fact, if you're 62 right now, not a problem. It's going to be phased down. But if you're like me at 53 and you're able to keep what you make, you shouldn't need a handout, not from your children. Because there will be 2 and then there will be 1. And I don't think anybody would really want that. Matter of fact, it's going to lead to a revolution in the United States because the minorities are the ones that are going to be paying the most in Social Security, being taken out from these $5 an hour jobs. And when it reaches 1-to-1, watch out. They're not going to do it anymore. All right, what about guns, or what should we do if we're ordered to give up our guns and our food? Well, under the Emergency Acts, matter of fact, I've got them, and what I did, I got a little emotional the other day and I tore them up. So I got to get me another copy of them. But there is a whole series of executive orders that actually makes the president a dictator. Here they are, as a matter of fact. And this is what's going to happen. Yeah, it's on her back, as a matter of fact. This is what's going to happen the first day in office. Did a president write these orders? Yes, he did. If a president wrote them, can a president tear them up? Yes. And so I have torn them up because we don't need these kinds of orders if America's in trouble. America's going to reach out, just like we do always, and we're going to help each other if we are truly in trouble. But these orders, for example, drafts all citizens into workforces under government supervision. Right. Here's one that is just, you've got to give them top marks. Here's an executive order that says that it empowers the Postmaster General to register all citizens nationwide. That, I believe, is the mark of the beast, soon to be offered. So these things get torn up. I would not, and you've got to be fairly clever about this. They got all over Randy Weaver. The media came out because I did a careful reconnaissance when I was in his house. I walked around looking at all his handiwork, but I was counting guns also. There were 15 handguns, semi-automatic firing submachine guns, and rifles and shotguns in his home. You think that's bad? Come to my house. There are 200 million weapons in the hands of 250 million Americans. I got more than my share. But my family will not be intimidated. I know guns. I wasn't afraid of the Weavers. It's not guns that hurt people, it's people that pull the triggers of guns. And I have friends when we lived in LA who now have all these bars all over the house. It's too late. The wife has already been raped. The husband has already, the children, been intimidated. Well, if it happens to me, it's going not to be because I wasn't, in the ways I can be, prepared. And so if they were to come around and say, Bo, we're going to take all the weapons that you have registered, I'd say, fine, I'm not going to shoot at that point. If that's what they're going to do, and they have got me, then they're going to take those. But it doesn't mean that I still don't have weapons. Because in all honesty, it was not the Constitution nor the Bill of Rights that gives us the right to keep and bear arms. Is it the Second Amendment that gives you the right? It isn't. It says, will not be infringed. Who gave you the right to keep and bear arms? God Almighty. That's exactly right. And so you don't need to let the government take your arms. But under this executive order, by the way, your extra food would be seized if they knew that you had it. You would be called a hoarder because they don't want to see. Randy had a year's supply of food in his cabin. They rolled an armed robot up to the back door, and they started saying on the first 5 days until I got up there, they said, what are you having for breakfast today? We're having blueberry pancakes. Well, Randy Weaver was doing just fine. He had a year's supply of food. They were treating the gunshot wounds with cayenne pepper and golden seal. Vicki was a nature path. She had all of these herbs in mason jars all over the wall of her kitchen. Too bad she wasn't there to administer. What do we say to those that say a vote for Bo is a wasted vote? Guy on on Chuck Harder's program the other day, he said, boy, I'm just not going to vote for old Slick Willie. So Chuck said, well, who are you going to vote for? I can't vote for that turkey George Bush. Well, who are you going to vote for? Well, you know this guy, Bo Gritz, he'll probably get about 2 million votes, but he just can't win, so I just can't vote for him. And Chuck said, well, that's one way to make sure he doesn't win. Let Jimmy the Greek figure out the odds with the sports books in lost wages. When the media ask me, Bo, what chance have you got? I say, oh, about the same chance David had against Goliath. I mean, you think Jimmy the Greek would have given David maybe the same chance that Gideon had with 300 against 130,000 Midianites? Not much, right? Maybe the same chance that a little colonial army under the leadership of a colonel from Virginia by the name of George Washington had against the disciplined regiments, the Hessians, from Germany, wearing red coats. Most powerful force on earth. But they won. So let's do what we can do. Are you going to cast your vote just because you think, well, I think this person might win, so I want to vote for them? Cast your vote the way your conscience says. Then at least when you do have to report, before your Maker. You'll be able to say, look, I did everything I could personally. It wasn't my fault that somebody pulled the plug on the United States of America. I would say vote the way your conscience votes, or tells you to vote, and then leave it up to God Almighty. He'll take care of Jimmy the Greek.
Let's all say we voted for both.
What are we going to do about the public school system? It's real easy. You see, the president appoints all these, doesn't he? So when the president appoints them, that is not just simple, that is also easy. We are going to get rid of federal education. It's just that simple. H. Ross Perot said he was for centralized federal education. You know what that is? That's the fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto. Who is writing these kinds of things? It's amazing to me. I believe the commies are, or the people up in New York that occupy the Pratt Building and the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. Here's what we do. We are going to privatize education in America. It means it goes down to the communities. The man that do it is a guy named Paul Lindstrom. He is head of the Christian Liberty Academy out of West Chicago. He furnishes a lot of the home teaching texts for people right now. I just have to tell you, I was in Snowflake, Arizona. Anybody even ever heard of it before? I don't know how in the world. Don't tell me you came here from Snowflake here. But I was in the home of a friend, and a young girl, 16, what does a gnarly character like me have to say to a young person, 16 years old? Just trying to make conversation. I said, well, what are you going to do when you finish high school? And she says, oh, I'm already a sophomore in college. And I said, how can you be a sophomore in college? You're only 16 years old. What was the answer? I'm homeschooled. Yeah, is your wife here? Matter of fact, you know the most dangerous thing in the world was not the 500 militarized police. The most dangerous thing in the world was my wife. If Weaver would not have come down, if the Lord had not opened that door that day, and the Weavers would have come down, my wife would have come up on that hill. Here she is, as a matter of fact. We've got 4 children, 3 mules and 1 daughter, and we have a testimony for you. There is joy when the last teenager leaves home. So don't look for joy until then. When that last teenager, our daughter Melody is the youngest of the litter, and she's 19. You know, her feet didn't even touch the ground when she was growing up. You talk about, see, after having these boys, to get a daughter finally was a great thrill for me. She was Daddy's girl, and her feet didn't even touch the ground until she was about 14. Then she landed like I land sometimes, with about 3 bounces. But now her feet are getting lighter again, so they do get through it. But Claudia has, and if you can imagine, she had to give a talk before 1,700 people in Enterprise, Utah, while I was up on Weaver Mountain. If she would have had to done it again, I got a feeling that Weaver would have been down off the mountain, and so would have I and all the FBI. So she'd have probably drug them down herself. She has stuck with me through 10 years of frustration in trying to bring our brothers home from Southeast Asia. It's a long ways. She's had people tell her there's no way your husband will ever come out alive. She has known, because my code name in ISA was Bear. And because I insisted on getting her involved, we are equally yoked. And because I insisted on getting her involved, they gave her a code name Little Bear. As it turned out, I'm glad, because she got a chance to know what was going on from the inside. Fellas, let me tell you something. I don't care what your occupation, whether you work for the CIA, or whether you work for the huge air crash company, or whether you're a school teacher, don't try to keep secrets from your spouse. That means no matter which way you are, male or female. Share, because when this whole thing is over, the one thing I learned about the Weavers more than anything else, you hold your children, you hold your spouse a little tighter, a little longer than you ever thought necessary. because you never know when that time comes that they might be taken from you. Now, a soldier has learned that lesson. I've learned it very well. So the Lord, and you can see why. When, matter of fact, I was her karate instructor, and we got married in the karate studio. Well, it seemed like the thing to do at the time. And it's pretty interesting how she has just stuck with me through all this thick and thin. But the day I saw her, I have to. The day I saw her, I knew that there was a pearl of great price. Now, you can see that we've been married for 18 years. There was a pearl of great price there, and I looked at myself in the mirror and said, "Self, if this lady will agree to be your bride, how are you ever going to pay back?" And I knew that there'd be a great requirement. And I've been striving to pay back, and you know, you're always in arrears, aren't you? But as long as we're in arrears to our Heavenly Father, then I'm thankful for that. But Claudia has literally, when I've been weak, she's been strong. That's why it's necessary to yoke yourselves together. Because when she stumbles, I try to press on, and she's there with me. She's there allowing me to chart our course. But she's also there, sometimes I call her a nagavator. She's there as my co-pilot. I fly, she drives. But she's always there to give me her advice. Whether I take it or not, she kind of leaves it. We want to thank you for being who you are. Again, I hope you realize that for Claudia and I, she wakes up sometimes saying, "Where are we?" And I have to think about it for quite a while. You know, it is a very humbling experience when you'll have people who will stop what they're doing, their busy schedules, they'll come to give their attention to you. I guess the most touching thing that's ever happened to me my whole life was the other day, one of our people was called, the man died, and he was buried with his Bo Gritz hat on because his wife said he was just such a fanatic about what you stand for. Remember that. Claudia and I are just exactly like you are. We've come out of your ranks. We're willing to step to the front. Somebody's got to hold up the banner of liberty. But our arms aren't long enough to get around the problems. It's going to take at least 16,000. It's going to take millions of you in order to give us that kind of vote. If you do give us that vote, I hope that what we did on the Weaver Hill, it had nothing to do with politics, is an example. There's never a time that any of you are too far that a President of the United States shouldn't come to your aid as long as you're an American citizen. So God bless each and every one of you. We're going to be on our way. Give us your prayers as we travel. We don't use bulletproof vests and we don't have the money to buy security, but I got a feeling that there's plenty of those angels around and maybe even in chariots of fire. Thank you.
Gritz also is running for president. You may know him better as Bo Gritz. He is a war hero, 62 citations for valor, a man with impeccable conservative credentials. Gritz brought his independent campaign to San Diego tonight. His theme, Take America Back from the Republicrats. His platform includes eliminating the federal income tax, ending foreign aid, and returning to a high standard of decency.
Together we can, and I believe that we will, I think we must, bring back this nation as a nation under God, unashamed, looking at our dependency upon the Creator to do for us what we aren't capable of doing for ourselves.
Gritz is not on the California ballot this November. He is running as a write-in candidate.